Hello all, I'm Yogesh Singh. Welcome to my YouTube channel Yogi's Data Lab. So this is a video in the series of prompt engineering. What we have covered so far is that task is one of the most required component of any prompt. And today we are going to cover about role. We are going to talk about how role is important, why is role a recommended task, and how does role give you different results for the same task. Okay. So this is what we have covered so far. We have already covered task in the previous video. In case you have not watched the video, I'll go ahead and put the link on the top right corner of your screen and you can go ahead and watch the video. So that will talk about task, and today we are going to talk about role. So why is role a recommended component of any prompt engineering? Let's try to look at this. So let's try to understand exactly how it works is that uh, when a LLM is trained, okay, when a LLM is trained, be it ChatGPT, be it uh, Perplexity, be it Gemini, be it any of these LLMs which are trained, when they are trained on humongous amount of data. So when you specify a role, what we generally call it is we are giving it a persona. But what happens behind the scene is on the entire data that you have, what it is trying to do is it is trying to filter out based on the role, based on the experience, based on the skills, based on the audience. You are combining all of it together as to how you have to generate a result, right? So here, if you see, role prompting means explicitly telling the AI who it should act as before it performs the task. It will try to understand the perspectives, expertise, communication style, and so on. If you look at this, if you say you are a data scientist, you are giving a domain only, which sets the expertise but not the seniority and specialization. When you talk about act as a senior data scientist, you are setting a domain and you are setting a seniority. It sets the expertise level and the experience depth both. When I say act as a senior data scientist specializing in fraud detection, what are you doing? You're setting the domain, you're setting the seniority, and you are also setting the specialization, which will precisely calibrate to the knowledge area that you are looking at. Further, when I say act as a senior data scientist who explains complex topics to non-technical stakeholders. So what am I doing? I'm taking the domain, the seniority, the specialization, and the communication style, right? So that is where you will get the maximum precision. So as I said, whenever you are setting a role is not pretending or role playing in a fictional sense. It helps you to narrow down the space of the likely responses. Basically, you are filtering out from the entire data which it was trained that based on this, just give me the result what I'm looking for. A language model has been trained on vast amounts of text written by people with many different backgrounds. When you say act as a senior data scientist, you are telling the model to draw primary text that a senior data scientist would produce. The vocabulary, the reasoning patterns, and the level of assumption and the type of examples. Right? So you are not creating a persona, basically, you are providing the context that will guide the model to give you appropriate slice of that knowledge on which it was. Now, there are a couple of things that you can specify in a role, like you have the perspective, whose viewpoint the answer is written from, the vocabulary, where the technical terms or the plain language or the domain specific jargon, what you are looking for, the level of detail as to how deep or how broad the explanation can go, the assumptions as to what the reader is assumed to already know. When you say the reader is assumed to already know, it means that let's say you're preparing a report for management. So the management would be aware of exactly what uh, has happened in the past. So that is an assumption, right? So it is going to generate the results based on the assumptions. That is one thing that you can change there. Reasoning style, it can be analytical, strategic, technical, pedagogical, or business oriented. When I talk about the quality of output, we can say how well calibrated the answer is to the actual question being asked, right? So these are a couple of things where we can go with a role and what things we can change in a role. Now, let's see why role matters. What we are going to do is we are going to take the same task, which is how should our company increase revenue, and we'll try to give it to different roles. So I'm giving it to a marketing manager. So act as a marketing manager and how should our company increase revenue? So here, if you look at it, the focus from a marketing manager point of view would be on the customer acquisition, brand awareness, conversion funnels, digital channels, seasonal campaigns, and retention strategy. Recommends increasing ad spend, optimizing landing pages, launching referral programs, and segmenting the email list. So this is how a marketing manager will think about how to increase the revenue. If I ask it to act as a financial analyst and ask the same question, how should a company revenue increase? The focus will change. So the focus now will be revenue per unit, pricing strategy, gross margin improvement, cost to revenue ratio, and underperforming product lines. So it recommends raising prices on low elasticity products, cutting low margin SKUs, and improving collection cycle. So if you see here, the question is still the same. The profile has changed. So the focus area will change, and since the focus area will change, the response will accordingly change. Let's say you are asking a sales director about it. So act as a sales director and how should a company increase revenue? So for a sales director, the focus will be more on pipeline velocity, deal size, win rate, territory coverage, and the sales team performance. So it would go ahead and recommend based on untapped geographies, increasing average deal size through upsells, and reducing sales cycle length with better qualification. While if you ask the CEO about how the company will increase the revenue, so act as a CEO, you see the focus will shift. It will be on market positioning, strategic partnership, new business lines, competitive differentiation, and a long-term growth strategy. It recommends entering an adjacent market, acquiring a complementary product, and repositioning the brand for a premium segment. So, see, if you notice here, there were four roles, but the question was the same. And every time the focus area changed, and since the focus area changed, the response will accordingly change. And this is why role becomes a very important part of any prompt because the results that we get are more towards the way the area of focus and the response can be controlled. Now, let's try to look at a live demonstration. So the first one that we are looking at is explain decision trees, and we are going to try it with different prompts with different roles. So here the problem statement or the task is to explain decision trees. We are going to try it with different roles. I have connected it with OpenAI API behind the scenes, so the results that are generated are live. But since I have contained it or curtailed it to a very small size of response, you might not see a lot of significant differences, though you will see some differences. So what you can do is you can go ahead and try the same prompts parallelly where the results are not constrained and you will be able to see much significant differences as to how they are. So let's start. Let's run this prompt explain decision trees where I have not given any role as. So when you look at this, it says the decision tree is a flowchart like structure used for classification and regression tasks, representing decisions and their possible consequences. So these are the components. There are nodes, there are branches. These are the advantages and these are the disadvantages of a decision tree. That's without a role. Now, what I'm doing is I'm giving the same question, explain decision trees, where I say that act as a machine learning professor teaching a graduate level course and explain decision trees. Let's run this. Let's see what we get. If you notice here, this definition has changed. Decision trees are supervised learning models used for classification and regression tasks, structured as a tree like graph of decisions. So the structure, if you see, has also improved. You see, it has just given components. Here it has given structure where you have nodes, you have branches, you have leaves. How does it work? It is recursive partitioning of the data based on feature values. Splits are chosen to maximize information gain or minimize impurity. And then the advantage. If I ask the same question to a data scientist, so act as a practicing data scientist with 8 years of industry experience and explain decision trees. So if you look at this, the response will slightly change. So decision trees are supervised learning algorithms used for classification and regression tasks, modeling decisions and their possible consequences. If you look at the structure, it is comprised of nodes, branches, and leaves. These are the key features. So from a data scientist point of view, this is easy to interpret and visualize, handles both numerical and categorical data, and no need for feature scaling or normalization. From a software engineer point of view, what could be the result? So as a senior software engineer who needs to implement a decision tree from scratch, explain decision trees. So these are a type of supervised ML algorithm used for classification and regression tasks. The model decision based on feature, the model decisions based on feature values. It knows the structure, how it is. Now look at this, the key concepts. The splitting is dividing the data set into subsets based on feature values. You didn't have that in a data scientist. The key features were different. Then impurity measures use matrix like Gini impurity or entropy to evaluate the quality of splits. And overfitting prune the tree to prevent it from becoming too complex and fitting noise in the data. That's again, you see the same question just from different point of view. Let's try to do that from a high school teacher. Let's see what is the result. So for a high school teacher explaining the concept for first time to students with no technical background. If you look at this, uh, the visual representation is imagine a tree with branches and each branch represents a choice or a decision. That's the most simple way of explaining it. Now, starts with a question on the top root. Based on the answer, you move down to different branches, choice to reach the final decision, which is the leaf node. Used for classification, helps in sorting data into categories. For example, deciding if an email is spam or not based on certain features like keywords. And it is easy to understand. If you notice here, it was the same question of explaining decision trees under different rules, and every time the way we got the response changed. So this becomes a really important part of how we specify a role and how does this role change the results of the prompts that we are getting. Now, let us look at the second demo where we will try to talk about how do I negotiate a salary increase. Now, if I don't give any role over here and I try to run the prompt as to how do I negotiate a salary increase. You see the responses are research market rates, prepare your case, choose the right time and practice confidence. So pretty much you'll get it everywhere. But let's look at this. Know the average salary for your position and industry. Document your achievements, contribution and added responsibilities. Request a meeting after a successful project and during performance reviews. And rehearse your pitch to be used to discuss your value. I'll give a role. So, as a HR director who has approved and rejected hundreds of salary increase requests, how do I negotiate a salary increase? So, you're asking it from an HR perspective, exactly how you should do. So, again, pretty much the topics are nearly the same, but understand industry standards for your role and experience level. Highlight achievements, contribution, and how you have added value to the company. Align your request with performance reviews or project completions, which was not there, right? Now rehearse your conversation, confidently present your case and handle objections. This is coming from HR director. If I talk about it from an executive coach point of view, like act as an executive coach who has helped senior professionals double their compensation. How do I negotiate a salary increase? It says know the industry standards for your role and experience level. This I pretty much believe is common everywhere. Prepare a list of your contribution achievements and your quantifiable impacts you have made. So this is also nearly the same. Rehearse your negotiation points and anticipate counter arguments. So this is slightly different. Um, Consider benefits, bonuses, and other perks if salary is non-negotiable. Now this is something very different, which comes from the thought process of an executive coach. If I ask the same question again from a career coach, so act as a career coach who specializes in helping data and tech professionals advance in their careers. How do I negotiate a salary increase? So it starts telling you more details like use sources like Glassdoor, Payscale, and industry reports. Know the average salary of your role and experience level. Prepare your case where you list your accomplishments, skills, and contributions. Highlight how you have added value to the company. You choose the right timing, so you request a meeting following a successful project or a performance review. Avoid high stress periods for your manager. That's very peculiar, and that's actually what you should avoid. Then practice your pitch, so role play discussions with a friend or a mentor, and be clear, professional, and confident during negotiations. If you want to go with a peer mentor, like a senior data scientist, so act as a senior data scientist with 10 years of experience who has successfully negotiated three major salary jumps. So, how do I negotiate a salary increase? Let's look at what is generated here. So this has given you pretty generic, like standard. Understand the standards for your role, location, and experience level using platforms like Glassdoor and Payscale. Prepare data on your achievements such as projects completed, revenue generated, and efficiencies created. So revenue generated is something which is you should have everywhere. Now choose the right moment after a successful project or during performance reviews to initiate the conversation and rehearse your negotiation points and responses to potential objections and build confidence. That is from a peer. So if you look at the way they have responded, now this is a very generic topic, so pretty much you have got a very generic response in most of the cases, but slight difference in the results. So if you try this on your LLMs parallelly while going through the video, you'll see the responses are big. I've just clipped it to a smaller segment, so not much differences to see, but there are slight differences that we are looking at. Now let's talk about the professional applications of role prompting. So when I talk about the professional applications, let us say you want to go ahead and do data storytelling, KPI summaries, executive dashboards, stakeholder reports. So you can go ahead and add a prompt like act as a senior data analyst presenting findings to a non-technical leadership team. In case you are doing model selection, feature engineering, production trade-offs, technical documentation, you can go ahead and say act as a senior data scientist with production ML experience. In case you are doing requirements gathering, user stories, gap analysis, process documentation, so you can use act as a business analyst who translates business requirements into technical specifications. In case you are doing system design, architecture designs or architecture decisions, technology trade-offs or scalability planning, you can go ahead and use a role like act as a senior software architect designing scalable distributed systems. If I say vulnerability analysis, risk prioritization, security recommendations or compliance review, so I can go ahead and use a role like act as a cybersecurity consultant conducting a threat assessment. For portfolio analysis, risk profiling, asset allocation, and financial planning, I can say act as a senior financial advisor reviewing the investment strategy. For project planning, risk management, stakeholder communication, time estimation, I can say act as a PMP certified project manager managing a cross functional team. For API documentation, user guides, README files, or developer onboarding, you can say act as a senior technical writer documenting software APIs for developer audiences. So, what are you looking at these prompts? You see, you are given a role, you are given an expertise, right? In some cases, you have given a role, you have given an audience. In some cases, you have given a role and you have told what is it that you are expecting. So, everywhere the way it is going to look at the perspective that it is going to build or the data that it is going to be filtering out will be based on the role and based on the seniority, based on your audience, or based on the expertise that you have given. And that is what is role prompting. There's one more concept which is known as role stacking. Now, what is role stacking? So, role stacking means assigning multiple roles or perspectives to a single prompt. So this is useful when the task requires expertise from one or more than one domain. When you want a response that balances technical depth with communication clarity. So let's try to understand that with an example. So let's say that I am trying to combine a domain with a communication style. So act as a senior data scientist who is also skilled at explaining technical concepts to a non-technical business stakeholders. Explain why our ML model is producing unexpected predictions in terms that a VP of operations can understand. So here you have set a communication style to explain it to the VP of operations, and you are asking a data scientist to do that who is skilled at explaining technical concepts to non-technical business stakeholders. Similarly, if I look at combining expertise with critical lens, so act as both a senior software engineer and a security auditor. Review this Python code for both functional correctness and security vulnerabilities. Provide two separate sections in your response. So, what are you doing? You're looking at both a senior software engineer and also a security auditor, right? So, you're combining the expertise and critical lens. Now, combining the domain and audience awareness. So, act as a financial analyst presenting findings to a board of directors with no finance background. Analyze this quarterly revenue data and produce a summary suitable for strategic decision making. So, if you look at this, again, you are combining a domain and you are also telling about the audience who is your audience. Now, important things to understand here is that your stacking that you're doing should never be contradictory. It should be complementary. Both of them should support each other. It should not be that both of them contradict each other, like act as a beginner and an expert simultaneously. Now, this cannot happen, right? They are contradictory. So, if you say act as an expert who explains to beginners, this makes sense. So, this is complementary, and this is how your role stacking is done. Now what we are going to do is going to just have a look at the roles and what happens if we are not giving the roles and what happens when you give vague roles and so on. So let's try to understand this. So let's say that I say suggest how we can reduce customer churn for a SaaS product. So it will give me a generic list of 5 to 7 universally known retention tactics. That's it, because it doesn't know anything about what you're doing. Act as an expert, suggest how we should reduce customer churn for a SaaS product. So it will give you marginally better structure, right? Because you gave look at a structure, behave as an expert, but you did not give a domain as such and what you are looking for. Now, act as a product manager, suggest how we can reduce customer churn for SaaS product. So now it will focus on onboarding flaws, feature adoption, in-app messaging, NPS tracking, and from a product lens. So it will start thinking from a product lens basically. If I specify a specific role and a seniority, so act as a senior product manager with 10 years of experience in B2B SaaS. Suggest how we can reduce customer churn for a SaaS product. So now this includes account health scoring, expansion revenue strategy, CS team intervention triggers, and cohort based churn analysis. A full role can be act as a senior product manager with 10 years of B2B SaaS experience, specializing in customer success and retention strategy. Suggest how we can reduce customer churn for a SaaS product. Now, structured as a prioritized action plan, early warning signals, segmented intervention playbooks, CS to product feedback loops, and success matrix definitions. Right? So it is ready to present to the leadership team. So if you see here, it is again the same task and 5 different roles and how they are going to give you the result. Now there are certain common mistakes which people do, like the role is too vague to provide guidance, like act as an expert. That's it. Or the role does not match the task, like act as a graphic designer and explain neural networks, how they learn. So neural network is something of AI, graphic designer has a different profile, so they are conflicting. The role contradicts itself, like act as a beginner and an expert at the same time, which we discussed before. The fictional or implausible role, where you say act as an AI from year 2150 with the knowledge of all future events. So it is not going to be God, right? It's not going to be predicting something way out of the way. It will start hallucinating because it doesn't have any data that it is going to predict. Then you just say give a role and you don't give a task. You say you are a data scientist. Fine, I am obliged, but what is the task that I have to do? Act as an academic researcher writing a PhD thesis. So summarize this for a sales team. Now, an academic researcher is nothing to do with a sales team. Right? They're two different profiles altogether. So the role is mismatched. So these are a couple of mistakes, common mistakes. The best practices that you can have is be specific about the domain, add seniority when depth matters, add specialization for precision, include communication context when needed, match the role to task, use role stacking for multi-lens tasks, and keep roles realistic and professional. So this is going to help you to significantly improve your results of role prompting. So the key takeaways that we can say is that role changes perspective, role changes vocabulary and depth, role changes assumptions, specific roles outperform vague roles, role should match the task, and role prompting is context, just not a pretense. Right? So role prompting is a single line, but the impact is not. That we all saw today, and this is all that we have in role prompting. The next topic that we are going to do in the next video is more about context prompting. So if you did like the video, please to like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching. See you in the next video.